Real-Time 1960s presents Evening Report, a complete roundup of today's news with Joe Rubenstein.
Good evening. In New York City, rioting in Harlem and Brooklyn, in Vietnam, news coverage is set to expand. In Mississippi, the search for 3 civil rights workers continues. George Wallace withdraws, Malcolm X speaks out on Barry Goldwater, and the Phillies are riding high. Those are the headlines. The details after this message.
Black Flag House and Garden Spray for both indoors and outdoors. Not only kills bugs where you see them, Black Flag's invisible fumigating action attacks bugs you don't see. Kills bugs where they hide.
Smells good. Saves up to 29 cents.
Black Flag House and Garden Spray.
Relative peace returned to New York City last night for the first time since major rioting turned Harlem and the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn into battlegrounds last weekend. The disorders were touched off by the fatal shooting 8 days ago of James Powell, a 15-year-old Negro, by off-duty police lieutenant Thomas Gilligan, who was white. On the afternoon of July 16th, Powell and some other teenagers had been menacing a building superintendent in the Yorkville section of Manhattan when Gilligan, who was in a nearby radio repair shop, heard the commotion and came out to confront the group. According to witnesses, Powell rushed at Gilligan with a knife, did not respond to a warning shot, and was then fatally shot by the officer. A knife was recovered at the scene, and a grand jury hearing on the shooting is now underway. Gilligan, 36 years old, has been on leave since the incident. During the worst of the rioting last weekend, large groups of Negroes roamed the streets of Harlem, smashing windows and attacking whites who crossed their path. At the same time, Negroes on tenement roofs showered policemen with bottles, bricks, and homemade incendiary weapons known as Molotov cocktails. In return, the police fired warning shots over the attackers' heads. Newsmen were also attacked by the rioters. On Tuesday, President Johnson instructed the FBI to thoroughly investigate the rioting, stating, quote, "Violence and lawlessness cannot, must not, and will not be tolerated. American citizens have a right to protection of life and limb, whether driving along a highway in Georgia, a road in Mississippi, or a street in New York City," unquote. Later on Tuesday, New York Mayor Robert Wagner cut short his European vacation and was met at JFK Airport by Police Commissioner Michael Murphy, Acting Mayor Paul Scrivane, other top officials, and aides. Following an airport briefing, the meeting was resumed at Gracie Mansion, the mayor's residence, and continued until close to midnight. Afterward, a mayor's aide met the press.
Well, we just met with the mayor for 2.5 hours. And we gave the mayor a rather complete picture of the situation as it now obtains in Harlem, so that we feel that now he has a fairly good understanding of what's going on up there. He's been up since 2 a.m. this morning, and he wants to think about all of this. He's given us various assignments. Even though the hour is late, we're all going back to our respective offices to carry out these assignments. And then sometime in the early evening tomorrow, the mayor hopes to go on citywide television and address the people of the city of New York.
He was asked for the mayor's reaction to the situation.
Well, I must say that it's a very serious mayor. He's very upset about what's transpired up there. He's particularly upset about the image that's being projected throughout the world by these incidents. And I think tomorrow he will dwell at some length on all of this.
But even as he spoke, the violence continued. That night, rioting in Bedford-Stuyvesant followed a rally held by the Brooklyn branch of the Congress of Racial Equality. By 1:30 a.m., over 1,000 Negroes had massed at the corner of Nostrand Avenue and Fulton Street. When the crowd became abusive, 40 additional police were summoned to help the 20 already there. Shouts of Uncle Tom and Black Cop were directed at Negro policemen, and a loud cheer arose when one demonstrator shouted, quote, "Let's get the Jews before this is over," unquote. Shop windows were broken, stores were looted, and an unmarked police car was burned before order was restored. There was also violence in Harlem that night, where gangs began looting stores at midnight. As on the previous 3 nights, traffic was diverted from Harlem's main streets, except for local buses and emergency vehicles. The following day, On a street corner in Harlem, Negro residents of the neighborhood gave their views on the rioting.
Speaking for myself, I think it should have happened a long time ago, because the Negroes they ain't gonna get anything by just asking, just demonstrating alone. So maybe if they create a little violence, maybe white folks see the light of things for us. The March on Washington, that should have did some good, but it didn't help. So maybe if we use a little violence like the white folks in Mississippi is doing, we'll get more out of it.
A middle-aged woman expressed a different view. Toward the end of her remarks, she was interrupted by a young man who disagreed with her.
This particular person objects. I am colored. We want leaders to lead the people to work, educate the children, but not to have them running around acting like crazy people. And then those who agitate them stands in their homes and laugh. Here we have the fools running around, destroying property. If they go breaking up 125th Street, who is going to employ the colored people that are in those stores? Remember, the colored people have nothing to employ the colored people, so then why destroy what you cannot build up? We want the people to have work, education, and respect for law and order. Getting on roofs and throwing missiles down. Last night on my stoop, I was afraid in my own neighborhood. Why should I be afraid to live among my own people? We are not animals, we are human beings. And we do not want this agitating and this killing and carrying on. We do not want it. We are paying the tax.
Lady can't speak for everybody.
We
She speaks for herself. She speaks for herself. She don't speak for the Negroes of Harlem. She speaks for herself.
Finally, another young man was asked if the riots were achieving anything.
Some, they are. They're bringing people closer together. Eventually, it's going to be a civil war. That's the way I feel. It's going to be like it was years and years ago, because Negroes years ago didn't have any type of ammunition. They knew nothing. But the world is growing a little wiser each day, and they're learning more. And they're more skillful than it was years ago. And it's going to be trouble when they really come down.
On Wednesday night, Mayor Wagner made a TV and radio appeal for calm, stating, quote, "Law and order are the Negro's best friend. Make no mistake about that. The opposite of law and order is mob rule, the way of the Ku Klux Klan and the lynch mob," unquote. At today's press conference, President Johnson was asked if he had seen any indications of communist incitement of the rioting, as Mayor Wagner and others have suggested.
I receive detailed reports at the close of each day with regard to the investigations that have been carried on by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I would not hesitate to say that the impression I gained from reading those reports is that there are extremist elements involved, and at the appropriate time, their identity will be made known.
One reporter noted Senator Barry Goldwater's announcement this week that he would make violence in our cities a subject of his presidential campaign. The reporter then asked Mr. Johnson if he, too, would make this a campaign issue.
Well, I'm against sin. I'm against lawlessness, and I'm very much opposed to violence, and I think we have to put a stop to it. We do not have a national police force in this country, and we have not assumed power that we do not have and we don't intend to, but wherever there's violence, we respond to it within the limits of our power and our authority, and we deplore men taking the law into their own hands and men disregarding the law wherever it takes place, and we treat them all alike.
In Cairo this week, Malcolm X, who was attending an African Unity conference, said the violence in New York was the result of, quote-unquote, outright scare tactics by the New York police, adding, quote, "This won't work because the Negro is not afraid. If the tactics are not changed, this could escalate into something very, very serious," unquote. Mr. X then offered a backhanded endorsement of Barry Goldwater for president.
Well, if Goldwater ever becomes president, one thing his presence in the White House will do, it will make black people in America have to face up to facts, probably for the first time in many, many years. And this in itself is good, in that Goldwater is a man who's not capable of hiding his racist tendencies, and at the same time, he's not capable of even pretending to Negroes that he's their friend. So this will have a tendency to make the Negro, probably for the first time, do something to stand on his own feet and solve his own problem instead of putting himself in a position to be misled, misused, exploited by the whites who pose as liberals only for the purpose of getting the support of the Negro. So in one sense, Goldwater's coming in will awaken the Negro, and it will probably awaken the entire world, more so than the world has been awakened since Hitler.
On Wednesday, Senator James Eastland, Democrat of Mississippi, alleged that the summer civil rights drive in his state was backed by communists. He also suggested that the disappearance of 3 young civil rights workers, Andrew Goodman, Michael Schwerner, and James Chaney, may be a hoax. The 3 young men went missing in Mississippi on June 21st. The senator said intensive investigation had failed to produce any evidence that the 3 were victims of racial violence. Eastland's belief, which is shared by many whites in Mississippi, is not shared by Robert Moses, director of the Summer Project, who said suggestions that the 3 men may be safe in Chicago or Cuba point up, quote, one of the problems in Mississippi, the refusal to be realistic, unquote. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover also stated earlier this month that the 3 men had most likely been murdered. 2 weeks ago, Hoover traveled to Jackson, Mississippi to open a new FBI field office there. He was asked how long the search for the missing men would go on if the bodies were not discovered.
It would be impossible to estimate that. We'll continue this searching every area where there is any possibility that they might be found. The area is a very difficult area to search. It's entirely possible that a body can be missed in those kind of searches where you're searching in swamps. I am enthusiastic and I'm optimistic about this case being solved. We will continue on it indefinitely. I'd like to just point out there have been cases, if you recall the Brinks bank robbery in Boston, that took 6 years to solve. There have been other cases that we've been able to solve, like the Sinatra kidnapping case on the West Coast last December, which we solved in 5 days. This case will not be closed at any time until the solution is reached.
I'll have more news for you after this message.
Aching joints, arthritis, minor pain. No rubbing can make salves or liniments penetrate to reach that pain deep inside joints and muscles. Get Liquid Heat. Heat soaks deep into skin fast, and when heat soaks in, pain flows out. Heat replaces pain from deep inside joints and muscles with hours of soothing relief. For relief of aching joints, arthritis, minor pain, get Heat.
Here again, Joe Rubenstein.
The United States is expanding news coverage facilities in Saigon and encouraging reporters to come see for themselves how South Vietnam, with U.S. assistance, is battling for its life against the communist Viet Cong. U.S. officials in Saigon have been referring openly to a credibility crisis, and in the face of increasing demands for the truth about the war in South Vietnam, have started the new drive for more coverage. The new program was worked out in detail with the Pentagon and State Department as an effort to permit the world to get a balanced picture of the war. At today's press conference, President Johnson reaffirmed the U.S. promise to defend South Vietnam.
We are determined to support the freedom and the independence of South Vietnam. It is true that there is danger and provocation from the North, and such provocation could force a response. But it is also true that the United States seeks no wider war. Other friends suggest that this problem must be moved to a conference table. And indeed, if others would keep the solemn agreements already signed at a conference table, there would be no problem in South Vietnam. If those who practice terror and ambush and murder will simply honor their existing agreements, there can easily be peace in Southeast Asia immediately.
This afternoon, Senator Wayne Morse, Democrat of Oregon, said the U.S. should bring the issue of Vietnam before the United Nations. Morse, renewing his attacks on administration policy in South Vietnam, said the war, quote, ought to be taken off the bloody battlefields, unquote, and brought to the conference table. On Sunday, Governor George Wallace of Alabama ended his third-party bid for the presidency. His campaign had been expected to compete with the conservative states' rights appeal by Barry Goldwater to Southern voters. In Phoenix, Goldwater said the action was a complete surprise to him and then declined any further comment. On CBS TV's Face the Nation Sunday, Wallace declined to endorse Goldwater, but it seems unlikely that Johnson and the Democrats will put forth a program agreeable to him. He called the administration's position on civil rights, quote, a political gimmick on this matter of race, unquote. He also attacked the media, stating, quote, the American people are sick and tired of columnists and TV dudes who get on the national networks and instead of reporting the news as it is and shame the devil, which is what they are supposed to do, try to slant and distort and malign and brainwash the country, unquote. Meanwhile, there is increasing evidence that many in the Deep South who have voted Democrat for years are now turning to the GOP. This week, one Alabama business leader who recently changed parties remarked on the shift.
The Democratic Party has moved to the left with all of their socialism and liberalism. The Republican Party, the Goldwater Republican Party, has moved in, and it more fits my views today than the Democratic Party does. We are fed up with the central government and its encroachment and its powers, and we are turning to the man, Goldwater, who better typifies our thinking in the South with his conservatism.
He was asked if he believed Goldwater's support in the South would filter down to candidates running for state and local office.
Yes, I think that Democrats cannot put themselves in any other class except to be part of the National Democratic Party. And as such, they are going to have to state their views as being part of the National Democratic Party, and I don't think the people of Alabama will re-elect National Democrats to positions in the State House or in the courthouse, in all positions. And I think as this year and in the years ahead, you're going to see Republicans in those offices, conservative Republicans.
Sports, right after this.
In your heart, you know he's right. So go Goldwater, let's go Goldwater, let's go Goldwater all the way. Just make a note to cast your vote for Mr. USA. Goldwater!
At Philadelphia International Airport last night, more than 4,000 joyful fans met the National League leading Phillies as the team returned from a road trip 2 full games ahead of the second-place Giants. Just a few hours earlier, the Phils had defeated the Braves 13-10, while San Francisco was crushed by the Cubs 12-4. Airport officials said they hadn't seen a reception like it since 1950, the last time the Phillies won the pennant. After 2 delays, the team finally landed just before 11 o'clock. By then, several thousand fans had been waiting for over 2 hours. Some carried hand-lettered signs. One sign boosted Callison for president, a reminder that outfielder Johnny Callison had smashed 2 home runs and knocked in 5 runs in the game yesterday. One young Beatles fan thrust his sign above the crowd, which read, "Hey Phillies, we love you, yeah, yeah, yeah." One youth, 17-year-old Marty Ricci, bedridden with a broken leg, was wheeled along by his happy chums. Tonight, in their series opener against the 7th-place Cardinals, the Phils coasted to a 9-1 victory. The Giants crushed the Dodgers 11-3, so the Phillies' lead stands at 2 games. In the American League, the race is also tight, with the league-leading Orioles in front of the Yankees by 1 game and the White Sox by 2. And that, for this evening, completes our look at the latest news on this Friday, July 24th, 1964. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day tomorrow.
This has been your Evening Report, a roundup of the latest news with Joe Rubenstein.